Of one particular guy on YouTube who's saying he upped his dose to 1.2 grams. That's not true. It's not true. It's definitely not true. He's lying on camera. And they like to lie. Why? Because if you say you took less, first of all, you're not influencing people to take more. So you justify it in your mind, I'm being ethical. Second of all, your selfish side wants to feel cooler. You want to feel like you're genetically blessed. I took 1.2 grams. I just have good genetics. No, you didn't. You didn't, because you have pointy elbows, your head grew. We know how much you overdosed the GH. You would not do that if you didn't try 2 grams or 3 grams at least. Anyway, my point on what I'm trying to get at. Hello friends, welcome to week 8's Q&A's, joined by my lovely wife Lucie.
Hello.
Lucie will continue asking me some of your questions from Instagram. Let's go to the next one.
The next one is by Mac Duki Boy, something like that. His question is pretty long. So, best way to diet and use gear but also look attractive. I see 19 and 20 years old who pursue bodybuilding look like they're 40 and smoke 2 packs a day. Even the classic guys. But then you have some fitness personality and physique guys look their age and actually better and fresher, and it doesn't seem to be entirely genetics because it's a trend among 90% of the guys in the field. I remember Amin saying Anadrol ages you in the face and Anavar and Deca do the reverse, but I might be mistaken. And then he posted again and said this wasn't really the case in the 90s. The up-and-coming teens who started gear even earlier look fresh and healthy on the outside. Must be the new drug protocols and diets guys are on nowadays. I know trend does this the worst, and back in the day most guys just did 276 milligrams of Negma parabolin amps, and now you see Joe Rogan discipline doing a gram of it.
So that was a long question. Thank you for reading it. Okay.
He was trying to give a lot of context around.
Okay, yeah. No, it's a good question. Good question. Thank you for reading it. Because I know there are a lot of words that you're not familiar with, like John O'Regan or these things. Thank you so much. So, I'll try to remember everything that he asked and give my commentary. Let me address first of all the misinformation there. Or not misinformation, but things I don't agree with. So it was mentioned that Anadrol ages someone in the face, whereas Deca and Anavar do the opposite. So Anadrol is a highly inflammatory molecule, from what we can tell. There is actually a bit of research on it, but it is inflammatory. So you could say in the long term it will age you in general, not in the face. It will age in general. That's a ridiculous thing to say, it ages you in the face. What it does do is raise your blood pressure and cause water retention in the body. So it can cause your face to get bloated and red. Like a lot of powerlifters you guys see, if you look at powerlifters, they have very bloated faces, especially on the day of competition. You've seen this with the arm wrestlers. Yeah. When I used to compete, they come red the day of the competition, right? So that's from Anadrol, a lot of it. But Anadrol does not age your face. This is ridiculous, this comment. Deca does not do the opposite either. That's also ridiculous. Deca is also highly inflammatory in the body for sure. Okay, it's horrible for your lipids, which I think has something to do with the inflammatory effect. But beyond that, it is a very unnatural molecule by nature, just like Trenbolone, right? Or NPP. But what it does do is it causes so much water retention that people look smoother. Maybe that looks good on Deca. Now, I wouldn't say, if Anadrol is aging you because your face has water, which doesn't make sense actually, it'd make you look younger if your face has water. But anyway, basically this comment doesn't make sense really. Anavar may age you less because it is definitely a less inflammatory molecule. That's true. Oxandrolone is a less inflammatory molecule, no question about it. But if you're a serious lifter, and you're a male, it's pretty much useless. It's pretty much a girl's drug. And any of you guys listening to this, don't think, oh, I haven't tried real oxandrolone. I've had real oxandrolone. What many of the people watching this have never tried. I know it is powerful, but if you're talking about, if you're a competitive athlete, okay, you're a competitive athlete or a serious bodybuilder, you're trying to get huge, not just have some muscle for the beach, or you want to bench press 500 pounds. At that point, oxandrolone is nothing compared to anadrol, nothing compared to testosterone suspension for strength, nothing compared to halotestin for strength. Incomparable. It's like a girl's drug. And in reality, in bodybuilding, it's mostly used by girls. So that's one thing. But then let's talk about the aging. So was he saying that in the 90s they were not aging as much? Or was he saying, did he use the 90s? I'm curious.
Yes, he said that now, like before they used to.
But when was
fresh and
before?
healthy.
Did he say?
Yeah, this wasn't really the case in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay. So that's interesting because I disagree. In the 90s, you had two forms of bodybuilders. You had the bodybuilders of the 80s that were now aging, that they looked fine, and you had very young bodybuilders that didn't yet get the effects from what they were doing. Like people who now have lost legs, people who have lost many kidneys, people who have aged considerably. Of course, many of these people are African American, so it's much more difficult to notice the aging on the face of someone who has high melanin. Like even myself, actually I look quite old, but that's for other reasons. I led a very difficult life in terms of aging before I got obsessed with longevity, which is one of the reasons I'm obsessed with longevity. I had a very inflammatory life for many years. So don't judge me, but anyone like my father, anyone who's darker skinned, they won't look like they're aging as quickly. So African Americans in general, like you guys will notice, especially if you're Caucasian, it's hard to estimate an African American's age as accurately as a Caucasian's because the white skin gets damaged from the sun quicker. A lot of what we see when we see aging on someone visibly is actually the sun damage on their skin. It's other things also, which I can get into in a little bit, but a lot of it is the sun. So you may find with African Americans, they don't look like they age as much, but you may also want to check out another thing. They do die younger than Caucasians on average in America. They do die of heart disease more than Caucasians. They die younger, but they because of the skin, they don't look like they're aging as much. If you're dying younger, you are aging faster. Okay. That's just how it works. And aging is not this, there's something called chronological aging, which means right now I'm 31 years old chronologically, but I could be 35, I could be 40, I could be 25 in terms of my cellular aging. And cellular aging now, as of about 5 years ago, we can actually measure it. There's a process invented by a guy called, I think, Steve, but his last name is definitely Horvath. Horvath came up with something called the Horvath Clock. You can go on Google Scholar and find the information about this. It's a way to test methylation in the body that accurately shows the overall level of cellular aging. And there are some companies right now, I always provide references for clients. You can go pay for like Johns Hopkins, the hospital, will test your Horvath clock and tell you a numerical age. There are some slightly cheaper methods that are less accurate using the Horvath clock as well. But, I don't recommend everybody do it. I just say if somebody's wealthy, the reason why is, okay, so I check my age. I'm 35. What does this tell me? In reality, I'm 31. It tells me bad news. What do? Just pay attention more to my health? You should be paying attention to your health either way. The only way this is useful for someone to do is if, for example, you're using a certain kind of lifestyle and you're experimentally trying it out for a year. You test yourself before, you test yourself after. Then you change your experimental lifestyle for another year, and then you test. Did I age more in the second year or the first year? But even then, it would be hard to tell because you would have different life stressors, especially psychological stressors. So for example, when people have children, when they have babies, they usually age tremendously in the first 3 years. People who have checked their Horvath clock, that's one of the worst times for them. They age very quickly, and then they slow down again when the babies are a bit older. And so things will age you, but in general, what you're seeing when you're seeing someone's age, you're seeing their skin damage, which all UV radiation damages your skin. The way in which your skin releases melanin to change its color is a protective mechanism to deal with the sun. And every time your skin is releasing that melanin, you're incurring some kind of skin damage. Which is why I'm such a hypochondriac with the sun, because the sun is inherently damaging. Now you need the sun to activate your melanopsin cells in your eyes to let the melanopsin cells tell your brain that it's daytime for your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is tremendously important for health, but you don't need to be sunbathing, and you could be wearing sunscreen and putting it on your hands. So that's one thing. So we're talking about aging. So what I want you guys to remember is chronological aging is not the same as cellular aging. And if you're dying younger, you're aging quicker cellularly, even from heart disease as well as from cancer. You're incurring DNA damage at a quicker rate overall. Now, why do the bodybuilders... Oh, another thing which I want to disagree with. So basically the point is, in the 90s, I don't think that the bodybuilders were not aging as quickly. They were aging. They're the first guys who started aging quickly. Mm-hmm. But most of them, you couldn't see it because they were African American, it's less visible. And the second reason, the most important reason, they were young. They were 25, 24 years old. Flex Wheeler was young then. They were all young. And they only got older now. And if you look at them now, those guys have the worst health problems. All of them. I won't name their names, but all of them have health problems. Except I don't know if Sean Ray has a health problem. That's the only one that I don't know about from the famous ones. But like everybody else, not that I don't know these guys. I've actually never met... Well, I've met one of them, but I've not met most of them. But I hear things because I have, friends that are in bodybuilding circles, and I know... Anyway, we know for sure some have major health problems. The point is, they have health problems, and they still, by the way, they don't look that old. But that's because of a skin color thing. So, before the 90s bodybuilders, now people are aging even faster than those guys, right? And that's because right now they're doing more than what the 90s guys did. They're doing more growth hormone, they're doing more IGF-1, they're eating more all day. They're eating, maybe not more protein, but they're eating more all day consistently without any fasting, without any long breaks of not eating. And basically they're doing everything more. I think that this is because when the forums started, originally the forums used to be what? People used to go on forums, they used to say, I know what the real bodybuilders are taking. I know that they take this and that and that. And there used to be these guys, you guys may not have been on forums because you may be younger, but there used to be guys we call vets, the forum veteran of the forum. He has 2,000 posts, 3,000 posts. He knows what he's doing. This guy would be some small guy in his house, he's not muscular even, but to get a big personality online, like, I can remember many of the names, but I won't mention them. But the point is, a lot of these guys, they would either say they know what bodybuilders are really doing, or they would just pretend that they know a lot about this stuff. Like, for example, a famous one of these is Jason Blaha. Jason Blaha used to go around forums, and he would go on Google, search for the individual steroids, try to learn what he can from them. Then he would go on forums and tell people authoritatively, dogmatically, what's the correct thing to do. So his account used to be called Body by Finaplex. Finaplex is the tablets of Trenbolone. Years later, he was on the GH15 forum, which is the ultimate forum for this kind of crap. And Blaha also, that's how he became well known on YouTube. He started videos like in 2012, 2013. I saw those videos because in those days I used to still watch this kind of stuff. And he was basically doing videos on different steroid hormones before other people were doing it. He would go on Google, and then he would come on YouTube and say, I know, But so anyway, the point is, forums really sped up the use of hormones and made people think like this. Normal people, not professional bodybuilders, made them think that guy could be taking this, that guy could be, so I take more. Then what really sped it up was YouTube. When YouTube happened, then people started realizing that how much people really take, and you could talk and you could make a video, and people they openly talk about things. I think that's when, combined with the Chinese medications, which became Chinese steroids, which became easier to get. Those two things, YouTube and the Chinese things, led to people really taking a lot of gear. Like, for example, by the way, I love this guy. This is not in any kind of way disrespectful. I like him a lot. Boston Lloyd, who is a very honest guy, and that's why I like him, because I never met him, but I chat with him sometime on emails before, and I like him a lot. He's a very honest guy, very humble, my kind of person, family man also, very much a respectable man. But he used to experiment a lot, like I used to experiment. I've taken very high doses too, not as much as him, because he go crazy. I mean, this guy was injecting so much sometimes that he literally didn't have a body part to inject in. He would be injecting 3 cc's, which is the most you can put in the basic syringes. There are also 5 cc syringes in each body part, the shoulder. And he would run out of places in some of his cycles. He had so much oil with the molecules in his body, definitely not being digested, definitely causing systemic inflammation. But anyway, that's what led to people like that developing, is having YouTube and having already the foundations from the forums, and then having these easy Chinese drugs to come over that are cheap. And so the new guys now, they use more than anybody ever used. They took what the 90s guys introduced, which is the abuse of growth hormone, the abuse of insulin-like growth factor 1, the abuse of food, and they took it up a notch. And these guys end up dying really early, like in their 20s, in their, So that's my view on what's happened overall. I know this is a bit long-winded, but you wrote a long question, and I think you wanted to actually talk about it in detail, right? So this is my view on this. And I, if we had like actually Boston Lloyd told me he would come on the show when I first opened the channel, but I just didn't have any guests on yet. But maybe I'll talk to Boston about this one day. Maybe you guys will enjoy learning or listening to it. Not that there's much to learn, but anyway. So you were asking, how can you avoid aging like rapidly as you do the bodybuilding lifestyle? The first thing I would say, fast. There's 3 kinds of ways you can fast, in my opinion, for this purpose. The first is a term that was popularized by a circadian rhythm researcher based in San Diego called Sachin Panda. Sachin Panda, probably I'll put a picture of him here. Sachin Panda is a researcher that invented a term called time-restricted feeding. Basically, he did a tremendous amount of studies on mice that show that if you restrict the hours that they eat, not the food that they eat, but just the amount of hours into a window, like 11 hours or 10 hours. He started with 12 hours for humans, but for mice eat more frequently, so it's different. You have to translate it into human terms. But in terms of human terms, the basis was that if you don't have 12 hours of fasting, which he calls time-restricted feeding, during the day, you rapidly develop circadian dysfunction. Your intestinal system, your liver, your pancreas develop dysfunction because they have an off period. They only work for about, 10 hours, 11 hours well. Then you become insulin resistant for the other hours. And this starts with your first meal. So if I have coffee with cream in the morning at 8 a.m., my liver and pancreas have started. And there's a clock. By after 12 hours, you get more and more insulin resistant and damage starts happening. And there's he's a researcher also mainly into light, but this happens with food too. So time-restricted eating is the first principle. What Sachin Panda will tell you is that if you reduce the time that you're eating from 12 hours to 11 hours, you double the metabolic effects. Every hour you double them. From 12 to 11, from 11 to 10, and he doesn't do research into the more extreme levels, which is what I do. Now, if you're a bodybuilder, you're not going to be eating for 4 hours a day. That's not going to work for you. You're not going to eat enough. Actually, potentially you could, but you'd have to have a very well-designed diet if you wanted to do that. Let me give you some tips. If you ever wanted to restrict your diet so few hours, here's what I would do. You would need a lot of fat because you would need a lot of calories, okay? You would need to make sure that your insulin, your gastrointestinal system is working perfectly. So you need to time it very well. You need to have fiber. You need fat for high calories. You would need very nutrient-dense foods. What are those? If I was you, I would consume liver and some shellfish. Okay, like we didn't mention this in that video, but I'll add a note. But we consume shellfish like oysters, specifically oysters and clams. So what I would do if I was you and I was eating in a very small window, I wanted to make sure I get all my vitamins and minerals. And by the way, you cannot rely on multivitamins, multiminerals for your vitamins and minerals. They don't get digested in the same way at all. Like you can see this with calcium studies, you can see this with vitamin C studies, various studies. A lot more they don't deposit in the body as like. If you're eating B12 from liver, your body will continue storing more and more and more B12 every day that you eat it, to the point that you could get toxic effects. If you take B12 in a supplement, if you take more, what's going to happen is you're going to go to the bathroom and your urine is going to be green because it's going to come right out of your body. Your body can't digest it like that. So what you want to do is you want very micronutrient dense foods. And this is what I do for clients that I do their diet packages. My go-to is like a little bit of liver, a little bit of oyster, and a little bit of clams every day, at least. So if you're doing like a 4-hour window with a bodybuilder and you want to optimize it, I would include a bit of liver, a bit of oyster, and a bit of clams in that meal. And then you would have quite a bit of fat, so you get high calories with not screwing up your gastrointestinal system. You do your fiber, and then you get your adequate amount of protein from food, because it's much worse digest from. Although there aren't good studies showing this, but I am completely certain that protein supplement shakes are not sufficient. Now, so what I was going to say, the first thing is fast. So the kinds of fasting, time restricted eating, which I just covered. Then what I recommend is to take 1 day a week for bodybuilders off food, 24 hours. You eat the night before, or ideally like not at the end of the night, because at the later night you get some, and we avoid this sometimes, we ignore this, but as your melatonin rises, you become more insulin resistant. So 2 to 4 hours before you sleep, your melatonin rises. So during that time, you're insulin resistant. So you ideally don't want to be eating during that time. Although people like us, we get hungry at night, so we can't really, it's the best that we can do. But, so what you want to do is end your food at ideally like 4 p.m. the day before. Then fast for 24 hours. You do this once a week. Don't take any hormones or any drugs on that day. Don't take any supplements. Don't take anything. You can drink your coffee. You can drink green tea, hibiscus tea. You can drink water. That's all you do that day. Once a week. So you time restrict feeding. Maybe you do it 12 hours. Maybe you do it 11 hours. You take 1 day off a week. And then every quarter, you take 4 to 5 days off. Okay, you could do a week if you feel really gutsy about it, but from the research, it doesn't seem...
Fasting, you mean?
Fasting. 4 to 5 day fast. You need to do more than 3 days. This does not work before 3 days, and it's not necessarily that important to go above 5 days. You continue to have... It's not necessary. So what I would do is 5 days fast every 3 months. So you have 1 day off a week, 12 hours off every day, and 1 week of 5 days off every 3 months. That will dramatically lessen the speed at which you age and allow your body to repair itself every day. Avoid metabolic syndrome, which is what is so many of these bodybuilders these days. That gut and that insulin resistance and all of that. I'm talking about even the top bodybuilders that you guys don't think have metabolic syndrome. They have metabolic syndrome. You can see it. If you recognize enough people with metabolic syndrome, you can see it. So those guys, it's because they never stop eating. And some of these guys even used to wake up in the middle of the night and drink a protein shake. Some of them have YouTube channels. And those guys had big guts when they used to compete too. And there's a reason, the metabolic syndrome, they're storing all this fat. And they think that they need protein so much. The body is not crazy. It doesn't just burn muscle when you don't consume protein shake. It burns tissue like skin. Your body's not stupid. You're working out every day. It doesn't think, I should remove the bicep. No, it says, okay, I got some loose skin here, I'll burn that. Or I got some random extra scar tissue here, I'll burn that. You know what I mean? It doesn't just go straight to muscle. You don't need to be drinking a protein shake at night. You don't need to be eating the whole day. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, if your bicep is going to be 1 inch less big because of this, well, your waist is going to be 4 inches less big. So I would go with that and continue giving you some more tips. So moderate your protein. Now, don't do this at the expense that you go take high amounts of carbs. Like, I forgot the name of this guy, George Farah. George Farah, who got cancer recently. He, unfortunately, and recovered, which is wonderful. He had a lot of his clients for many years because this guy, he was shot in, I think he was robbed or something, and he was shot in his kidney. He's a Lebanese guy, actually. He was shot in his kidney. And so because he had a less functioning renal system, he recommended he tried it himself and it worked. He would take less protein and he would consume more carbs. Because what happens, Lucie, by the way, your body can only digest a certain amount of protein every day. But past that amount of protein, and every sitting, past that amount of protein, what does your body do? It takes the protein, converts it through gluconeogenesis into glucose, which it then stores as glycogen. Remember that glycogen from the sugar? So what happens is a lot of the protein people were eating when they maximize their protein, like Milos Sarcev, who's a Yugoslavian trainer. Milos used to tell his clients to take 500 grams of protein every day. Just so you know, that's 5 times the recommended amount for a man. Okay. It's huge. That can cause kidney damage, for sure. No question about it. But he used to recommend that. Why? Because protein has many beneficial aspects. It's thermogenic. It makes the body heat up. It has a hormonal effect. It affects mTOR. It turns on mTOR. It does many things. Now, Milos's system works better for gaining muscle. But if you're talking about aging, protein is dangerous for aging in a variety of manners. It's not just one thing. Higher protein diet will age you faster. So, I'm not saying replace your protein with, I'm not saying reduce your protein to 200 grams or 150 grams and then eat the rest in carbs. I was saying put fat. Fat is way less inflammatory than the carbs, and then the protein, and aging than the protein. So first rule is fasting. 3 kinds of fasting. Second rule is reduce your protein consumption if you want to age slower. Third rule is beware of IGF-1. And that means beware of growth hormone, especially if you have functioning growth hormone receptors and IGF-1 receptors. IGF-1 is, in my opinion, the main reason that 90s bodybuilders and today's bodybuilders started aging quicker. That's the main reason. It's not the food. In my opinion, if you had to pick one thing, it's the growth hormone. If you guys are curious about this, go on Wikipedia, look at the list of tallest people in the world, and see when they died. When do giants die? In their 40s. In their 30s or 40s. They get insulin resistance, they become diabetic, then they die of heart failure. Just like all the bodybuilders right now. Is this a coincidence? No. It's a growth hormone killing people early. Now, other than killing people early, it also causes people to age quicker. So, for example, there are people living in South America, dwarfs actually, they live in a village together. They're related. They're called Laron Syndrome dwarfs. Okay. People with Laron Syndrome have a malfunctioning polymorphism on the growth hormone receptor gene. It causes them to be they're a little taller than normal dwarfs, than the extreme dwarfs that you think of. They don't look like primordial dwarfs. These guys are invulnerable from cancer. They're invulnerable from diabetes. They don't get diabetes ever. They don't get cancer ever. And they live a very long time unless they die by accident somehow.
Wow.
So these guys have the fountain of youth. And why? Because their growth hormone receptor doesn't work. So the body produces growth hormone, but the receptor doesn't receive it, so nothing happens bad to them. So if you guys go and take growth hormone, now you're already taking protein. Protein is increasing your IGF-1. Okay, you're taking carbs and protein. Your IGF-1 is already higher than a normal person's. You go to the gym, your IGF-1 is already higher. You don't want it to be super high. It will age you much quicker. Also, taking high dose hormones. When you take very high dose hormones, like what I tried before, or what Boston Lloyd tries, or things like that, you will end up in an inflammatory state. Your receptors can only, and everyone has different kinds of functioning androgenic receptors, and we don't know much about the androgenic receptors. By the way, 23andMe will do some of your androgenic receptors, but we just don't have research on them. I can tell you what the alleles are, but I can't confidently tell you what they mean in populations. We don't know which letter functions better than the other letter yet. We will know in like 5 years, we're gonna know. But the point is, depending on how your androgen receptors work, depending on how they function, how the chemistry of your body functions, there's a certain amount of steroids that you can use in your body and a certain amount you can't. I have known, especially in my field, arm wrestlers and powerlifters, that they could take 5 grams of testosterone a week, which is, by the way, 5 times the normal amount or so. And yeah, a normal amount is a gram, by the way. People who say they take 600, 700, those are people who are not competitive usually. Or they take a high dose of another hormone. But usually the standard dose is a gram to a gram and 200. There are guys that, and by the way, guys, when some of these bodybuilders tell you oh, I only took, I don't want to say the names, but I only took 1.2 grams. These are people that took 4 or 5 grams. Like, you can tell, if a guy was a mass monster, he was taking grams and grams. Unless he was African American, some of these African American guys have very good androgen receptors, and they can go with 2 or 3 grams. But they're still taking in grams, not 1 gram. I can think of one particular guy on YouTube who's saying he upped his dose to 1.2 grams. That's not true. It's not true. It's definitely not true. He's lying on camera. And they like to lie. Why? Because if you say you took less, first of all, you're not influencing people to take more. So you justify it in your mind, I'm being ethical. Second of all, your selfish side wants to feel cooler. You want to feel like you're genetically blessed. I took 1.2 grams. I just have good genetics. No, you didn't. You didn't, because you have pointy elbows, your head grew. We know how much you overdosed the GH. You would not do that if you didn't try 2 grams or 3 grams at least. Anyway, my point on what I'm trying to get at, we're being long-winded, but you asked a long question. So I know people who took 5 grams, and I swear to God, they digested every gram of it. No testosterone flu, they don't need Tylenol, they don't feel drowsy, they're not in bed. They have so many more androgen receptors and better functioning receptors than I do. Okay? If I took 5 grams, I got nauseous, I got lethargic, I got the symptoms of the flu. It didn't work for me. So Now it depends, but what I'm trying to get at is this. If you take more than what you can absorb, you will age rapidly, because these testosterone molecules running on your body are not, I mean, testosterone is less harmful than some of the others, but if you're taking overdose of the non-natural ones, not biosynthetic, not the bioidentical, your body has to get rid of these. So it has to turn on your inflammation. The more high your inflammation is in your body, when you're in a hyper-inflammatory state, meaning your inflammatory genes are hyper-stimulated in the body, the quicker you're going to age.
How can you measure that?
Well, that's a good question. So there's a few things you should do. On a blood test, the easiest way to measure that is the C-reactive protein. This is an inflammatory marker released by the liver. It's one of the first things. It almost always reacts when the body's in inflammation. You can check out your fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is also systemic inflammation. You can check out organ-specific inflammation. Oh, before we get to that, you can also go to Quest Diagnostics, for example. You can do their cytokine panel. And other blood test companies will have different panels. These will test your interleukins, interleukin 2, interleukin 6, all of the interleukins. They'll test your tumor necrosis factor, TNF. These are all inflammatory markers. If these things are high, and as a bodybuilder, you should, if I was a bodybuilder and I had a little bit of money, and you guys do have money because you spend it on the hormones. If you're a good bodybuilder, you're buying pharmaceutical hormones. You're not buying Chinese stuff. And if you're buying pharmaceutical hormones, you have the money to do a blood test every 3 months. Now, it depends on your state. If you're living in like California, you may need a doctor to prescribe it. But you may live in a state where you can order them online. Every 3 months, at least order your C-reactive protein. Or every time you change your cycle, a few weeks into it, when everything stabilizes, check your C-reactive protein. The higher it is, for example, C-reactive protein, when it's more than 0.3, you're in an inflammatory state. Now, 2 or 3 or 4.0, that's something. But if you're like me, you have an 11, which is what I used to have it sometimes, or 10, I put this on my Instagram. If you have an 11, you're aging really fast. Something's going wrong. You be careful. Okay, so that's one thing, is don't take very high doses to inflame yourself that much. And what else can we think of? Well, come back to the original thing that I started with, the sun.
Yeah.
No tanning. Okay, you guys are all using, nowadays they use the spray tan, or they actually not even spray. I think that they use like maybe they do use spray. I don't know what they use. I was not a bodybuilder. But whatever they use, you don't need to go in the sun. Some of those guys go in the sun to just look. I mean, the pro bodybuilders, some of them that are really neurotic, they'll tan and then do the spray tan just in case. But those guys are rare. What tanning mostly affects those guys that are like going to the club, they want to be muscular, they go out to the beach, they want to pick up girls. Don't do that, because it does age you generally, because the UV rays don't just age your skin, they age everything. But it will make you look older than you are. So your cellular age may not be as progressed as how old you look.
I see.
Okay, so I think that was a really long response, but it was a long question. The bodybuilders will like it. I don't talk too much about bodybuilding anymore these days, so maybe they'll like it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great day.